My name is Brian Schwartz. I'm the Vice President for Research and Sponsored Programs here at the Graduate Center, and I'm also a Professor of Physics. I'd like to welcome you all to the series of symposia and programs associated with the opera Dr. Atomic. As you know, the opera Dr. Atomic opened on October 13th, Monday, got rave reviews in the New York Times, and I hope many of you have seen it or are going to see it. At any rate, we have a wonderful program for you. I think the first half of this program is going to be two speakers, one on showing pictures and photographs of the Manhattan Project, and the second speaker will be sort of his role in many aspects of the Manhattan Project. The Manhattan Project took place in many different places, and you'll see that in some of the photographs. I'd like to welcome two photographers, Rachael Fermi and Esther Samra, who are going to talk about photographs related to that whole period, and they have a wonderful book on that.
The Manhattan Project with really just one image, that of the mushroom cloud, which has become an icon of mass destruction in our culture. This image has so dominated our collective imagination that it's difficult to see beyond it to grasp the multifaceted world that was the Manhattan Project. When looking at the mushroom cloud, it's tempting to see it as purely aesthetic. Abstracting photographs from their content and context can sometimes compromise the historical integrity of the event. As photographers, we are sensitive to the inherent beauty of a particular image, whether or not it was intended. But in our work, we're primarily interested in the relationship photographs have with science and art. In putting together the exhibit here at CUNY for this symposium, our goal is to explore ways of understanding the Manhattan Project, its complexity and its relevance to our world today. And photography is the ideal medium to explore that intersection because it is itself a product of art and science.
Between 1942 and 1945, top-secret laboratories and factories were built across the United States to make the theoretical possibility of an atomic bomb a physical reality. Thousands of people were involved, the vast majority knowing nothing about what it was they were making until the news that an atomic bomb had been dropped on Hiroshima was announced. And yet, despite incredibly tight wartime secrecy, we discovered that the number of photographs taken during the Manhattan Project was staggering. The photograph that sparked our interest to discover the Manhattan Project through photography was this color snapshot of a mushroom cloud. Rachael found this small, faded photograph in a shoebox of ordinary family photographs at her aunt's apartment in Chicago. The same ordinary family photographs we all have of holidays and relatives. The juxtaposition of family snapshots with the atomic blast was startling. The tension between the fragile but remarkable color image of the Trinity explosion, the primeval moment of the Manhattan Project, and the prosaic black and white family snapshots elicited a deep curiosity in us. How many of us have found the ultimate symbol of mass destruction in our family albums? The juxtaposition gave us a glimpse into how the layers of time, art, and memory in photographs could weave together to create historical insight and give us a unique perspective into the Manhattan Project. We found out later, on a visit to the archives at Los Alamos, that the photo had not been taken by Rachael's grandfather, Enrico Fermi, but by the SED Jack Abbey, who took this photo with his own camera of the world's first atomic explosion in New Mexico. It turned out to be the only color image taken, and it is this snapshot that is used over and over again in histories of the atomic bomb.
From that single discovery in my family's collection of pictures, we decided to look for both the official and the unofficial photographs made from within the Manhattan Project, like this page from physicist Charles Critchfield's family album, and this page from Robert Serber's. We uncovered many different kinds of photographs made for many different kinds of reasons. At Oak Ridge and Hanford, where uranium was separated and plutonium was manufactured, the construction and engineering companies took photographs of every phase of the building to protect themselves in case of later liability claims. PR photographers at Oak Ridge and Hanford and Los Alamos took photographs to demonstrate to the American public that life was normal in the secret cities, and scientists relentlessly documented their own experiments, like this detonation experiment from Los Alamos. Julian Mack and his optics group at Los Alamos included trailblazing photographers who created special cameras and invented new and still used photographic techniques, while the photographic team produced the split-second record of the first atomic explosion at Trinity that is scientifically mesmerizing, technically astonishing, and aesthetically powerful.
Until the publication of our book, Picturing the Bomb, in 1995, there hadn't been a photographic history of the atomic bomb. The same few photographs were used to illustrate histories of the Manhattan Project. We use photographs as the primary documents. Through the sequencing and juxtaposition, we explore the history, the art, and the science of the Manhattan Project. The photographs show what was observed, recorded, and sometimes stage-managed by scientists, soldiers, and factory workers. 60 years later, they form a strange and unique cultural album that belongs to all of us.
Another startling image of the mushroom cloud that we found is this image made by Charles Levy. This picture undercuts the abstract aestheticism of the mushroom cloud as it tells the story of a military strike. Levy was a bombardier on the Nagasaki mission and the only person on the flight with a camera. Physicist Robert Serber was supposed to be on that plane to officially record the bomb's descent and to calculate the explosion's yield with a camera that only he knew how to operate. But because of a missing parachute, Serber was thrown off of the plane and unable to witness history. Levy's amateur snapshot punctuates the mushroom cloud with the engine and wing of his plane, while the deckled edge that we normally associate with other kinds of snapshots frames its spectacular power.
It's nearly impossible to imagine the huge size and scale of the Manhattan Project without seeing it for oneself. This is something that photography uniquely can do. Massive factories were constructed in Oak Ridge and Hanford to separate uranium and to manufacture plutonium. Here, a photograph shows the enormous K-25 gaseous diffusion plant at Oak Ridge, which was 2 miles around, 44 acres, employed 12,000 people, and absorbed a quarter of the Manhattan Project's $2 billion budget, simply to produce enough fissionable uranium. Juxtaposed with it is an image from April 1945 Germany, showing a few uranium fuel pellets discovered by an intelligence mission sent by General Groves to find out how far along the Germans had been in their efforts to make an atomic bomb. Almost every industrialized country in the world had sufficient information to initiate some sort of atomic bomb project before the Second World War. And the Germans had Otto Hahn and Werner Heisenberg as well. But only the United States had both the industrial resources and manpower to launch the mammoth effort to produce fissionable uranium and plutonium. The photographs show the vast difference in scale between the German and the American projects.
One of the most important experiments of the Manhattan Project that paved the way to the atomic bomb was conducted by my grandfather, Enrico Fermi, in 1942 in Chicago, the first self-sustaining nuclear chain reaction. Those uranium fuel pellets discovered in 1945, part of Germany's failed attempt to produce a nuclear chain reaction. Unbeknownst to the Americans, they had been far ahead of the Germans in the race to build the bomb since the beginning. Inside this pile of graphite at an invisible atomic level, Fermi was able to unlock the energy latent in matter by splitting atoms of uranium apart.
Photographs help us understand these vast differences of scale at a level where words often fail us. Interpreting the photographs we collected involves sequencing and pairing them to make visceral the reality they depict. This aerial photograph, taken the day after the successful Trinity test, shows the ground around the tower from which the bomb exploded. The dark patch in the center is where the immense heat of the blast melted the desert floor. Below are the buttons of plutonium metal that were at the bomb's core. It only took a mere few kilos of this metal to create destruction on a vast scale. Here is Hiroshima, 3,800 feet west of Ground Zero, taken in September 1945 by the physicist Robert Serber, who was sent to investigate the effects of the bombs dropped on Japan. Next to it is the hand of Harry Daghlian, one of 2 Los Alamos physicists who died from radiation poisoning while conducting critical mass experiments at Los Alamos, ironically, also in September of 1945. He allowed himself to be photographed every day until his death 2 weeks later. We see no trace of human evidence in the unearthly image of an empty and devastated Hiroshima. Yet the hand of Harry Daghlian shocks us into actually witnessing what radiation does to the human body, and it moves us to consider the humanity of the thousands of people killed by the bomb blast and radiation. The single hand also reminds us that the very first atomic bombs were built by hand in a laboratory and only required 1 pilot and a bombardier to drop a single bomb with such an enormous and devastating effect on thousands of people. The chilling nature and the consequences of the atomic bomb are palpable here.
How we understand photographs from the Manhattan Project is also filtered by our knowledge of subsequent events. This formal portrait of Robert Oppenheimer was taken after the successful Trinity test, but before the bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. It was taken in anticipation of the publicity that would come after the bombs were dropped. The image stills a man who was often in movement. His eyes look at us soberly and with great import, it seems. When we look at Oppenheimer's portrait, we become face to face with him. As he gazes at us, we gaze back at him, looking for some clue, some sign of what he has endured and what is to come. Oppenheimer and his wife Kitty's Los Alamos ID badge photos, in contrast, were taken at the beginning of the Manhattan Project, when it was uncertain that the atomic bomb could be made or would work.
Something that is perhaps difficult to understand with 60 years' distance from the Manhattan Project is that while extraordinary scientific discoveries were being made and vast factories never before imagined were being built, daily life continued at its regular pace. The photos that we found in personal albums, like this one taken by Rachael's grandfather, of physicists John and Leona Marshall, and those made to recruit workers for the secret cities of Oak Ridge and Hanford, help us see the ordinariness of life during a very extraordinary time. We think this image shows the exuberance and excitement of scientific discovery without having to worry about what use could be made of it. The Marshalls worked with Fermi in Chicago, and then later went to Hanford to work on the world's first nuclear reactors, which were built to produce the plutonium that was ultimately used in the Trinity test bomb. Leona is smiling and holding a snowball. Next to it is one of the first images from the Trinity explosion, where the film's emulsion has actually been solarized and blistered by the heat of the blast. By itself, it looks like an eye. Together, on a formal level, the snowball and the eye of the explosion acquire an uneasy equivalency. But the snowball is cold, and the fireball is burning hot. The juxtaposition begs the question, did they understand the implications of what it was they were helping to build? The blackness of John Marshall's fur collar and Leona's gloves and the empty gray background behind them echoes the eerie blackness surrounding the emerging fireball. Unexpected questions and connections appear when we see these two particular images together. Here, school children are at play for a staged photograph used to recruit workers and their families to the secret town of Oak Ridge in Tennessee. On the bottom is the interior of one of the giant enrichment plants, also at Oak Ridge, where uranium was separated. The contrast between the two images is striking. Ordinary children are joined in a circle, seemingly far removed from any secret activity or connection to the cathedrals of modern engineering. Yet, less than a mile away, the Y-12 plant stood, and its interior racetrack, designed to electromagnetically separate the uranium that would later be used for the Hiroshima bomb, repeats the circle that the Oak Ridge children, innocent of these facts, had spontaneously created. Inevitably, each of us brings other associations to these photographs which differ, sometimes markedly, from their original intent.
The Manhattan Project included many different kinds of cultures, some of which strangely coexisted and some of which didn't. Looking at the history of the Manhattan Project through photographs illuminates these culture clashes. Scientists versus army, ancient versus new, open versus secrecy, all these worlds found themselves interacting in unpredictable ways. Here, the newcomer, the wife of a Los Alamos SED, stands next to one of Los Alamos' old neighbors from the nearby pueblo of Santa Clara, who is wrapped in a Native American shawl. This picture is paired with a photograph from one of the experiments conducted at Los Alamos, the interior of a water boiler reactor core. The formal beauty of this image, its coldness and its hard scientific and obscure significance, generates a formal tension between the ancient and the modern. It's a tension that several Manhattan Project members at Los Alamos, including Robert Oppenheimer, who had selected Los Alamos as the site for this laboratory, had pondered while they were up there on the mesa.
Photographs also reveal to us the balance between what was known and what was unknown. In Klaus Fuchs's Los Alamos ID badge, we look to see what, if anything, the form of the photograph can tell us. We know that when this photograph was taken, Fuchs was already passing atomic secrets to the Russians. Because there are very few photographs of Fuchs at Los Alamos, we look to him here to penetrate his elusiveness and perhaps to glean his motives. With Fuchs's ID badge is a Christmas scene from Hanford. Christmas celebrations continued during the Manhattan Project, but this one is ironically framed by barbed wire. But for all the secrecy and security imposed on the project, slips were made, and Klaus Fuchs got away with his spying, much like Santa and his reindeer are poised to fly from the barracks rooftop.
The fascinating relationship between the secret and public nature of the Manhattan Project has its ultimate expression in a photograph that belongs to Harold Agnew, who is with us here today. While many thousands of photographs were classified by the Army during the Manhattan Project, and many thousands remain so, there are some images that have sneaked by the censors. This photograph of Harold Agnew on Tinian, holding the core of the bomb to be dropped on Nagasaki, got caught between public and private worlds. It has the character of many other personal snapshots, except when you realize what it was the two men are so casually holding between them and how it would change the course of history. After Agnew had left the Manhattan Project, the FBI got wind that he might have some secret photographs. And when they visited him one day, he inadvertently showed them this one. That was when they struck a deal. If Agnew scratched out the bomb core, he could keep his photograph. The scratching may or may not have eliminated a secret, but unintentionally that act created a photograph that is both riveting for what it reveals and what it conceals. 60 years on, it looks more like a work of art than an amateur snapshot. Taken as a record of an auspicious moment for two men, it now evokes the elusive aura of the atomic bomb. We were at the beginning of a frightening period of Cold War secrecy when the bomb core was scratched out. Today, we look at the photograph and wonder what might have happened if the bomb had truly been erased and not dropped. A single photograph can possess the power to embody these contradictions and intertwined questions.
A photograph is never simple. Its significance shifts and changes according to its context and the relationship it has with the written word. Images capture fact, but also emotion. Certain photographs over time develop their own patinas, like the photograph from Trinity that Rachael Fermi found in a shoebox, or of Harold Agnew holding the atomic bomb core. Collecting contemporaneous photographic evidence years after an event enables us, the collectors, to re-envision that event and to make visible what was originally secret. Photographs give us an entry ticket to visit the elusive, closed world of the Manhattan Project. They invite us to be an inhabitant, if only for a very brief time. Within that world, we see things that we could not have understood without photography. And this is the compelling power that photographs from the Manhattan Project still have on us today. Thank you very much.
Maybe you could describe a little bit more that shoebox and how it happened that you came across a shoebox, because it seems like a very valuable shoebox.
I was in graduate school in Philadelphia, which is where I met Esther. And I went to Chicago to visit my aunt, and she had just moved into an apartment, and we were just looking through family photographs. And, you know, as you do, not everybody has their pictures beautifully arranged in photographic albums. She had them all loose in a box, and we were looking through them. And the photograph, the slide that we showed you, I mean, it's this size, it's faded in red, and it was in there, you know, with pictures of my dad when he was a little kid, and pictures of my grandparents, and, you know, lots of family members that I didn't know. And it was that real, finding that picture was so startling to me. I knew my grandfather had been involved in the Manhattan Project, but for some reason it really, seeing it next to family pictures, that juxtaposition was sort of just amazing. I didn't know what kind of a mushroom cloud it was. I didn't know that it was from Trinity. I didn't know if it could have possibly have been from Japan. And my aunt, Nella Fermi Weiner, she gave me the picture. And then a few months later, I was in Santa Fe, so I decided to go up to Los Alamos, to the archive up there, to see what kind, you know, to find out about the picture. And was actually met the guy who took the picture, which was Jack Abbey. And he had taken it with some of the very first color film that he had somehow gotten hold of. And he was working with Emilio Segre, another Italian emigre physicist. And he just decided, just off his own back, to take pictures of the Trinity explosion. And so that's kind of how we started the project. While I was up at Los Alamos, you know, asking them about this picture, the archivist, he was actually not there that day, it was his assistant, kept bringing out boxes and boxes of loose photographs. And it was interesting to me that the photographs from the Manhattan Project, and this was all photographs that scientists had made to document their experiments, were just almost sort of carelessly in a box at the archive at Los Alamos, in the same way our family photographs are sort of often loosely in boxes. And there were so many pictures there of things that made me so curious about that time that when talking to Esther, we were in graduate school for fine arts photography. We started talking about this and talking about the implications and how photographs are sometimes, they're not seen as the primary documents of history, and yet they have so much to tell us that words often can't tell us about what it was like to be in a specific place at a specific time.
Because of your publicity about this, have other family members or children who grew up there and ancestors come forward with any memorabilia, both personal, you know, about what it was to be a part of a secret cult almost, you know, that they might not have known about?
Yeah, I mean, we went around and met lots of scientists whose families were there. The Critchfields page from their album, they 4 kids grew up. They had, I think, 4 of their children were born at Los Alamos. So yeah, we did find a lot of, we did get in touch with a lot of people that grew up there.
Was the death of Enrico Fermi related to the work that he had done.
He died of stomach cancer
Yes.
At age 53 in 1954, but no, it's never been established that it was because of his work on the Manhattan or with radioactive materials.